All right, back here on the game on News Radio KMAN, John Kurtz, joined now by Phil Steele. You know, the College Football Bible comes out about this time of year every year. You can find it right now. I have my copy and have enjoyed getting a chance to read it so far, and just makes you feel like college football is right around the corner when we get to talk to Phil Steele. So, Phil, really appreciate you taking some time. Let's start with this. This has been obviously a better year than last year, not having to worry nearly as much about COVID, but when you're going through and doing your projections, your previews, how much does evaluating a year that was so affected by COVID last year change the way that you have to do this?
Yeah, and that's a key, I think. I de-emphasized last year's results a little more than I would normally do. Normally you think, well, that's the strength of the team, but last year there was a lot of unusual things that happened. I remember talking to Coach Rolovich over at Washington State, and he's like, Phil, you really can't take anything from our squad last year. We only played 4 games. When we did, we were down 20 players, and so you had to factor all that in. Now, some teams were fortunate last year and didn't lose a lot to COVID and had full strength for the entire year, and then others were beat up the majority of the year. You had to look at who the teams were playing, and yeah, there was a lot that went into it. But I think there are some teams that had false records last year, let's just say, maybe either winning or losing, that will probably come back towards the middle of the pack this year.
Yeah, when we talk about K-State, the Wildcats only won 4 games last year, but did have a year in which it wasn't just COVID that affected them, which it did, but also lost, obviously, starting quarterback Skylar Thompson in the 3rd game of the season, which really affected how things went the rest of the way. How much did you take that into account when you're evaluating K-State this year?
A lot. In fact, talking to Coach Kleiman, he is a guy that he's very high on Skylar Thompson, feels this guy's going to be playing in the NFL next year. And, if you watch Kansas State in the second half of the year, Will Howard had some moments in every game, but he also had some freshman moments in every game last year. And really, I saw teams starting to line up and just stack the line of scrimmage and say, go ahead and throw the football on us. And I think with a guy like Skylar Thompson coming back, that is going to be a huge part. And now, if something does happen to Skylar, at least Will Howard's not a true freshman getting thrown into the action. He's got that experience, and then you've got to watch the redshirt frosh, too, and Jaron Lewis. So I like the depth of the quarterback room, but I really like the improvement you're going to see with Skylar Thompson as a starting quarterback, if he's as good as Coach Kleiman says he is.
Yeah, where does Skylar Thompson to you rank in terms of Big 12 quarterbacks?
You'd have to put him up there as one of the better QBs in the conference. Now, there are quarterbacks in the league that are proven veterans that have played full seasons and put up big stats. You know, a guy like Spencer Rattler is a Heisman Trophy candidate. Brock Purdy of Iowa State's been about a 10-year starter there. Max Dugan throws for a bunch of yards and tough runner for TCU. And Spencer Sanders has had his moments at Oklahoma State. But I put him right in there, right around the 4th or maybe 5th quarterback coming into the season, just based on the fact he hasn't really had as much of the experience level after missing most of last year.
Phil Steele is talking with me right now. You have K-State in a tie for 7th. Outside of Skylar Thompson, what really stands out to you the most about K-State?
Deuce Vaughn.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, you just watch this guy run. I remember watching it early in the season. I'm just like, damn, look at this. Deuce Vaughn's a difference maker. And I think just getting the ball in his hands is huge. And then you got a guy like Malik Knowles, a wide receiver. You know, he's another guy that's probably the leader of the wide receiver group. He battled injuries last year. He also battled COVID last year. And I think having him back 100% for the whole year is going to be a big plus. Adding a guy like Daniel Amaterbebe at the tight end spot, I think, is a big plus. And then offensive line. You know, the offensive line goes 10 deep. So you've got the depth on the offensive line that Coach Kleiman's been building. And when you've got a veteran offensive line, veteran quarterback, and a breakaway guy like Deuce Vaughn, I think the offense is going to be solid. And then the other strength would be the defensive line. I like a lot of the players that they have up front. I think you're looking at some NFL caliber players. They've got good size, good experience level up front. So I think those would be the strengths.
When we're talking about K-State's schedule, one of the things that jumps off the page that is fairly atypical is that game against Stanford to begin the year at Jerry World in Arlington. I was surprised looking at the Vegas over-under for Stanford, seeing that it's a 3.5 heading into the season, which just seems crazy low, even though they do have a tough schedule. What do you make of what the Cardinal are going to be this year?
You know, I was about to start looking at some over-unders today, and 3.5? I'm thinking Stanford in the over. I talked to Coach Shaw at length, going over the team with him, and he feels that they are a legitimate Pac-12 title contender. In fact, he pointed out that last year, you go back to the Oregon game in the opening game of the season, their quarterback was false positive. And so, like 30 minutes before the game, they take their quarterback and their top receiver and say, nope, they can't play. And they had so many turnovers, and their kicker, Jet Toner, is a guy that has hit like 90% of his field goals in his career, and he missed four field goals against Oregon in that game. Every time they got down there, he missed them, and they ended up losing. But he felt that there was no talent difference between Stanford and Oregon last year. It was just an unusual circumstance. They beat Washington on the road last year, which would be their other contender in the North, and he feels that they're a legitimate contender in the Pac-12 this year. Now, they do have a new quarterback, but he's high on Tanner McGee. He thinks he'll play well. The running back room is extremely deep. Austin Jones, E.J. Smith, and Nathaniel Pete. You look at the receivers, Elijah Higgins and Bryson Tremaine, both NFL caliber guys. The offensive line could be the best that Shaw has put out there in quite some time, he told me, and defensively they look solid. So I'm going over on that 3.5, and that's going to be a heck of a game. I rate the game a toss-up to open up the season.
Again, Phil Steele is talking with me. Branching out to the Big 12, I mean, Oklahoma, you have as the number one team in the country. There has been plenty of buzz with Spencer Rattler and Lincoln Riley there at that spot. But it has been 16 years since we've had a Big 12 national championship. Any reservation at putting Oklahoma there because of that?
It's always a reservation when you're picking against Alabama. If you could just automatically every football season say I'm taking Alabama to win the national title, you'd be right half the time, right? But I think this would be the year for Oklahoma, and here's the reason. You take a look at the teams, the 4 teams that made the playoff last year, all of them only have about 10 or 11 starters coming back, and all of them lost their starting quarterback. Meanwhile, with Oklahoma, they didn't have that same type of thing. They have 15 returning starters coming back this year. They have a veteran quarterback, and Lincoln Riley's had 3 veteran quarterbacks in his 4 years. 2 of them won the Heisman Trophy, and the other one was a Heisman finalist. Rattler now has a veteran QB, and when I look at Rattler, I really like what I saw out of the Texas game last year. Remember, he got benched in the second quarter, but once he came back, he was a different quarterback the rest of the year. And they've got another weapon back there at quarterback, Caleb Williams. This guy's a dangerous runner. Watch him run. They may utilize him as well. The backfield is deep. Kenny Brooks was a 1,000-yard rusher that sat out last year. Eric Gray's a transfer from Tennessee, both capable of being a feature running back. The receiving core I rate number 2 in the country. Offensive line, number 1 in the country. Defensive line, number 3. And that, to me, is the key with Oklahoma. You remember the last couple times they made the playoffs, the defense really let them down. Now they've got a defense. In fact, I rate their defense a top 5 defense. And when's the last time you could say that about Oklahoma? Last year they allowed just 21 points per game, and I think they're even stronger this year. So with that offense and with that defense, and the fact they're a veteran squad, and Lincoln Riley, a pretty good head coach, I think Oklahoma's I do not have reservations this year. I think they're going to win it all.
Well, the Big 12, there's a pretty obvious line of delineation between 1, 2, and everybody else, and the other team up at the top is Iowa State. Is this Iowa State hype in terms of being a college football playoff contender for real in your eyes?
Yes. And Matt Campbell's done a fantastic job there. Last year they had an inexperienced offensive line. And Matt Campbell got them to be a semifinalist for the Joe Moore Award. This year when I talked to Coach Campbell going over the offensive line with him, he said it's the deepest offensive line he's had since he's been there, and a chance to be really special. Now you take that offensive line and you meld it with a Brock Purdy, a quarterback, a Breece Hall, maybe the nation's best running back, the best tight end room in the country with Chase Allen and Charlie Kolar, and a breakaway wide receiver in Xavier Hutchinson. That's a heck of an offense. And you know Matt Campbell's defenses are always strong, and they're led by my number 2 set of linebackers in the country, led by Mike Rose. So this is a veteran defense, a potent offense, and they knocked off Oklahoma last year during the regular season and gave them quite a game in the Big 10 to Big 12 title game as well. I think they are a legitimate national title contender.
I'm chatting right now with Phil Steele, previewing the Big 12 football season. Texas, to me, is a difficult one because you're losing Sam Ehlinger, who's been such a rocket quarterback for them over the years, and obviously a new head coach in town with Steve Sarkisian. What do you make of Texas this year with all of the change in Austin?
You know, prior to talking to Coach Sarkisian this year, I think I had major question marks with Texas as far as how are they going to adjust to the coaching change? Is there going to be a huge turnover of players? And like a first-year head coach goes through, especially with the advent of the transfer portal now, where if the players got any type of reason at all to hit the portal, they go and hit it. But talking to Coach Sarkisian, he's happy with the talent he inherited, and he kept most of the players there. These guys weren't going and hitting the portal left and right. And he did point out to me something that I had said last year, which was Texas was 3 plays away from being 10-0. I mean, you go back to that TCU game, they fumble at the goal line right at the end of the game when they were going in for the game-winning touchdown. The Oklahoma game was 4 overtimes, and even the Iowa State game last year, they led that thing start to finish. Iowa State took their first lead with like 2 minutes left in the game. So they've got the talent. Coach Sarkisian was happy with it. My biggest question mark is quarterback. Sam Ehlinger was a great game day player, led a lot of fourth-quarter comebacks. Will Hudson Card or Casey Thompson be able to do that? But they probably have a better supporting cast overall than Ehlinger had last year.